And if you're wondering who I am, thank you, Ellie, for the amazing intro, but my name is Tamara. I run a company called PMM Camp, where I help product marketers build leadership range to help make them indispensable. But I've been a product marketer forever, before I think it was even cool. I was a 2-time director, 2-time VP, and a chief strategy officer. And throughout my, I think, almost 14 years as a product marketer, I saw a lot of different changes. But mostly we kind of spent the last decade like earning our seat at the table, right? But I think recently I've observed a change. And when Martha told me that there was going to be 2 stages, one about kind of PMM now and one about PMM next, I was like, I want to be on the next one because I actually have an opinion about what's happening next. And I think that the hard work and the real work is actually just beginning for us. And so when I think about, the last decade, 15 years of product marketing, I divided it into 3 eras. This is my little nod to Taylor Swift for Samantha over there. So era 1, as we all know, was just us trying to be like, we need to exist. We want to define the function. You need a product marketer, and here's what it is. And that was an uphill battle. Eventually, we really started to get traction, and actually we became kind of sexy. Everyone wanted a product marketer. You couldn't find one. And that kind of brought us into era 2, which I think is the era that we're just coming out of now. And what happened was once more and more companies had product marketers, it became a little confusing, right? Because what you did at company A is different than what I did at company B than what you did. And so we all felt a little misunderstood. We've talked about that a lot at these summits. And so a lot of our time was spent kind of just describing our value and making sure that our full potential could be used. And I think we have now entered and are at the beginning of era 3, which is all about developing our leaders. So when I started out, there was no VP of PMM. There was barely even any directors. But now we have product marketers across every level, including C-suite across companies around the world, which is amazing. But because we still are a new function, especially compared to others, and because we didn't really have leaders bringing us along, a lot of us have been self-taught. And I really don't think that as a product marketing function, we've been given the skills or capabilities to lead as effectively as we could. So that's what I think is really important right now. A couple months ago, I ran a survey to hundreds of product marketing leaders just to try to understand the state of PMM leadership today. And one of the things that really stood out to me were their challenges. And it really kind of made me feel like, okay, I'm not the only one thinking that product marketing leadership is hard, and we're not really set up for success. What was cool is the challenges of PMM leaders were definitely different than the challenges of those coming up in PMM. It wasn't about building hard skills. It wasn't even about kind of defining the role. It was really about proving the impact. It was about positioning product marketing internally to get us into the right rooms. And it was about trying to avoid burnout. But the more interesting question I asked was around this question of how will you know if you've made it as a leader? And truthfully, I was expecting one of 2 answers. I was expecting either a job title, like I finally got director, or I now have team members. And those were on here, but in very small percentages. What actually came out that I was not expecting was 52% of people said, I will know that I've made it as a leader when I'm trusted to set business strategy and vision for the business. Which is amazing, but I don't think we've enabled people to do this effectively. Because the reality is that most product marketers are promoted across every level that you get promoted because you're an excellent executor. You do the job really well. The business can rely on you to deliver on time with a really great strategy and to always say, yes, and can I do more, right? But when you get promoted, all of a sudden, you're being asked to be more strategic. How many times have you heard that? Show of hands. People are yeah, exactly. Has anyone ever described to you what be more strategic means or how you'll measure be more strategic? We have these crazy expectations, but you're never shown how will I know if I've actually reached it and how to get there. And I actually don't think that the question is how do I move from being an executor to being strategic? We always talk about that. We've talked about that my 13 years in product marketing, and I think it's a false dichotomy. I actually think that leadership is about showing up in many different ways. There are times as leaders that we do need to show up strategically. We need to set direction for the business. But there's also times where we just need to get shit done, right? We need to lean into being operators. There's times where we need to unlock the potential of our teams, our stakeholders, the organization, and so on. And so I actually think, it's my personal thesis, that succeeding as a leader is about knowing how to show up differently depending on what the moment requires. And I call that leadership range. And range is the number one thing that separates excellent executors from indispensable product marketing leaders. Over the past 12 months, I have gone really deep into kind of studying leadership. I took all of my own experiences, the experiences of hundreds of product marketers that I've coached over the years, and a small group of people, many of whom are in the room, Yael and Scotty, to help me develop my signature leadership framework. And this is what you're looking at today. These are not archetypes. They're not personality types. I think oftentimes we say, oh, I'm a strategist, or, I'm really more of a people person. I get people on board. But what I have learned is that the best leaders are able to activate their different leadership range. There's 5 different kind of capabilities that we need to be able to tap into. And knowing when you need to tap into what capability to solve the challenge ahead of you is what is going to make you effective. Oftentimes, one of these is what has gotten you to where you are, right? For me, it was often I was a strategist. For others, it's wow, I was a connector. People just love me. They gravitate towards me. They believe me. But this will only get you so far. And so today, I want to walk you through the 5 different modes of indispensable leaders, as well as the 10 habits that you can build in order to strengthen these modes. Because the concept behind it is that in order to be able to activate the mode you need to be successful in your role, that mode needs to be available to you. It needs to be kind of fully charged, so to speak. So we're going to start with the strategist. This one is one of my favorites, and definitely the one that I leaned on the most. The strategist is the part of you that helps shape direction, right? It's the part that can kind of make sense of the bigger picture, spot patterns that other people miss, and really identify problems worth solving. And to kind of help explain the concepts today, I'm going to use my own example of a project that I worked on in my career. So I'm going to take you back to 2018. Look how energized I was. I just started my job as a director of product marketing at Unbounce. And I got there, and I said, ooh, this isn't quite what I thought. During my first week of talking to stakeholders, I realized that we actually had no idea who our best fit customer was. I asked 10 different people, everyone had a different answer. And even worse, everyone seemed okay with it. Like it didn't seem like that was a problem. And so I started to say, okay, I could just accept this job. I'm really excited to be here, be a director. I could just do product launches. I could build some competitive programs. I could kind of just like do the job that I think product marketing is. But instead I said, I think there's an opportunity for me to be more strategic. How do I carve out a unique place for me in this organization? And so I kind of tapped into my strategist mode to identify a problem that no one was solving yet. So what I saw, these are just a few screen grabs from back in when I got this job, but what I saw was that the landing page market, Unbounce is a landing page builder, but the landing page market was growing much faster than we were, which told me that our growth decline wasn't because of our product, it wasn't because of the market, it was because of our product and our strategy. So I dug into all of the data. I really realized that it was this like kind of generic segmentation strategy we had that was holding us back, did a bunch of cohort analysis, brought it forward, and really presented an opportunity that people couldn't say no to. It was super clear that there were some segments that were better than others, not just internally as customers, but also from a market sizing perspective. And because I'm the one that sourced the problem, I was the person that kind of raised their hand to solve it. And so if you're wondering, like, how do I know if I need to tap into my strategist mode a little bit more? Here's some signs that maybe it's not as activated as it needs to be. Oftentimes what I see is that product marketing might be defined by outputs, not the problems. So again, if I had just kind of not tapped into this mode, I would have just said, okay, great, I'll do whatever product launches. I know they're not going to land really well, but that's just what's on my responsibility list. But instead, I shaped a specific problem that I could own. And when you're kind of running your team based on outputs and responsibilities, not problems, more often than not, you're going to find yourself taking orders because everything can fall on your plate, right? And then often, what happens is we're tracking so much different data, customer data, market data, all of this, and we're just presenting it as data points, not recommendations. But there's a bunch of different behaviors that you can start to implement today to really start to strengthen this mode. First, identify the problems that only you are qualified to solve, right? And then clearly define your mandate around solving those problems. And then find and shape opportunities that you can actually recommend and own one path forward. And so there's 2 habits that you can build if you want to start to strengthen your strategist mode. The first one is position PMM's value, and then the next one is turn insights into action. Which takes us to our next mode, which is called the operator. And oftentimes people think of the operator as like the execution part of you, but it's so much more than that. And that's why I said it's not just about like dropping the execution part and going to strategy, but the operator is about strategically executing on work. They're the part of you that's going to help you drive business impact, right? They're going to take that strategy and actually turn it into action by grounding your work in things that the business actually cares about. And so going back to my Unbounce example, I surfaced this amazing opportunity that I thought would change the business, which was our segmentation. But now I needed to find a way to get it resourced, prioritized, and kind of a big project that we could work on. And I could have said, hey, I found this project, let's work on it, and probably would have become something side of desk. But instead, I spent time digging into what mattered to the business. What were our 5 company priorities for the year? And how could I map my work back to at least a handful of those priorities? So this is just kind of some brainstorming boards we did. But my team and I, we literally took all 5 priorities and said, how do we break this segmentation project apart to make sure that this becomes critical to the company delivering on their priorities? And we positioned it as a way to actually accelerate our way of reaching those goals. And the result was that we did get resourced, we did get prioritized, and we actually got resources beyond my own team in order to support the project. And so if you're wondering, well, does my operator mode need to be activated more? A few things that you might be seeing. Well, your work probably isn't being connected back to the business. You might be hearing, oh, can you push that to next quarter? Or why are you working on this again? Those are usually really clear signs that you haven't done a good enough job of mapping it. And you might be finding that you're really reporting on tasks, you're reporting on things that are completed, rather than actually letting all of your stakeholders know what's in it for them. What can they learn from what you've just achieved? If there's a few behaviors that you could start to prioritize in order to strengthen this mode, first of all, map everything that you're doing back to your company goals and objectives. This sounds obvious, and yet still people are not doing this. And make sure that when you're sharing what you're working on, that you are customizing it for each person, whether that's by channel or by stakeholder. And again, communicating, here's what we did, here's what we learned, here's what we need to do next, and here's why that matters to you. And so there's 2 habits that you can focus on in order to strengthen your operator mode, and those are anchoring to company goals and sharing your results. And the one thing I'll say about sharing your results is we get uncomfortable. I don't know why this is a thing, but it's like, oh, well, I don't want to come across as like rude or like I'm better than people. It is your responsibility to share your results. And sharing your results, I think a communication stack means daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual. And there's actually things that you can share across each of those time horizons to make sure that you are sharing effectively. Which takes us to activator, which is about unlocking your team's potential. So often, we're focused as our product marketers on getting to the next level, getting to the next level. Then all of a sudden you're handed a team, even if it's one person, and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't want to ask them to do things. I don't know how to bring out the most in them. And so being an activator is all about kind of building the rhythm, the clarity, and the environment for the team to do their best work, essentially. And so at Unbounce, when we got all of this work prioritized, I took a step back and I said, what actually needs to happen to get this project across the line effectively? And I really believe in the inbound-outbound divide. Tomorrow, actually, one of my friends is speaking about this. Highly encourage you to go to their chat. But I said, okay, inbound is the upstream work. What do we need to do in order to actually bring this strategy kind of to life? So this is the actual research itself, redoing our pricing and packaging around the value that these new segments want, even setting up tracking so we can actually measure the segments, because everything that we were doing, we were measuring the impact to this segmented market. Then I said, great, once we have the strategy, how do we actually get it to market? That's the outbound, the downstream. So this is like updating our website and buying flows, trial onboarding, all of that fun stuff. Divided that work that way, but I also divided my team that way. So I mapped all of the team strengths and I said, who is really great at doing the inbound work? Who is really great at doing the outbound work? How can we actually structure this in a way that like the team's actually going to enjoy the work, but the quality of the work is going to be better as well? And so a few signs that you might need to be landing into your activator mode a little bit more is if you're getting a lot of requests, well, you are getting a lot of requests, but when you get those requests, if you do not have a filter to say yes or no, that probably means that you are not setting your team up for as much success as you could be. If you're hearing, oh, I'm always busy, my team is busy, but I just don't think we're working on the right things, that's another sign that you haven't spent enough time in activator mode. And then finally, and I feel so strongly about this, if you're just assigning work based on who has capacity, not based on the actual competencies and skills of that person, then you definitely need to spend more time on this mode. And so what can you start to do today in order to start to strengthen this mode? First, you could build a decision matrix that helps everyone understand how you will say yes or no to all new requests. And this is going to look different for everyone in every company. But you should also be building a product marketing roadmap that actually clearly shows the hierarchy and prioritization of your work. I actually recommend that you divide that product marketing roadmap into 4 swim lanes, and I'm happy to chat with you about that later. But this should be like a main artifact that you're always building and managing for your team. And then, of course, as I've said several times now, map all of your team strengths and make sure that you're designing the roles accordingly. And so there's 2 habits that you can build in order to strengthen your activator mode. The first one is creating clarity and focus. So that's all about that road mapping bit, making sure that everyone knows what we're working on, why, and how we'll say yes or no to new work that comes in. And then the second one is all about organizing for impact, right? Both personal impact and business impact. So how do we actually match the right people to the right work? Which brings us to connector. Now, a lot of people, connector is either your top strength or your lowest strength, right? But most of us, we don't have time. We don't have time to spend more time with people. There's too many people that need our attention. But your connector mode is really the part that allows you to invest in people. It's the part that kind of recognizes, actually, when I do invest in people, it really multiplies what is possible. And it also makes work a little bit more fun along the way, too. So going back to unmounts, these are just a bunch of nice touchy-feely photos. But really, the story here is, connector was always my weakest mode, and I'm okay saying that. And it was a hard journey for me to discover that this was what was actually standing in my way. But when I did, I realized that I could get so much further faster and like bring everyone with me. So this segmentation project that I mentioned, it kind of took on a life of its own. Out of the data, we actually discovered that we needed to be focusing on very specific customer segments. And this meant a lot of hard decisions for the rest of the organization. This meant that, I was excited because my team was getting prioritized and getting all these resources, but it actually meant that we were taking other teams off of projects they were passionate about to work on this project. We actually decreased the size of the sales team by like 75%, which was really challenging and meaningfully shifted parts of the business. And I think if I had not invested upfront in the right relationships and built the right kind of trust and allies along the way, I think it would have been easy for people to be like, Tamara is the reason for all of this, or this is frustrating. Why does Tamara get more resources than me? But instead, because I had built this trust and I built these relationships, when I had to deliver difficult news or I needed to explain the impact of the strategy on people, people trusted me. They said, this is hard, but I trust you. This is hard, but I trust you to get us through it. This is the right decision. And so I just can't say enough how important your connector mode is. And so some signs that your connector mode might not be as activated as it needs to be. I know these were certainly true for me. The first one is that if your relationships are kind of like one size fits all, and you actually don't even know who you need to be building relationships with. And this is so hard because as product marketers, we feel like we need to build relationships with everyone, but that's not true. There are certain teams and certain people in the organization that you need to be prioritizing. And each of those relationships need different things. I love the chat earlier this morning where we were talking about going for those empathy walks to really build real relationships. Some relationships might need that. Some other relationships might actually just need much more data. Some relationships might need to be built in person, some offline. They all need different things. Another sign is if no one is actively championing your work when you're not in the room. And you might not be able to feel this, but you definitely feel when they are. And so if you're not feeling like they are, it's the absence exists. This means that you probably haven't spent enough time in connector mode. And then obviously everyone here cares about networking because you're all at a conference. But oftentimes we think of networking and our external relationships as secondary to internal, but they're equally important to being effective in your role. And so really thinking about how does that become an always-on practice? So what are the behaviors you can start to prioritize? First, actively nurture key relationships. Map out which relationships you need to focus on right now and understand what each relationship needs to succeed. And build advocates and allies at every level across the company. So often we focus on building allies like at our level or above, but we do need to activate allies like above us, below us, across. And then finally, make connection a priority, not something that you do if you have time. So there's 2 habits for building this mode. One is focused on internal relationships, meaning inside the business. So it's all about strengthening that trust. And then one is focused on external relationships. So all about building the cultivating of the connections outside. Which takes us to our final mode, which is all about the architect. And so the first 4 modes have all been very business focused, but the architect is the part of you that allows you to lead with intention, right? It's the part of you that's focusing on growing yourself, not just your career and your business. And so architects really think about their career with care, and the same way we talked about mapping strengths for your team, we also want to map strengths for yourself. So back to my Unbounce example. The reason I was so passionate about this segmentation project was that I'd actually done quite a bit of segmentation before I even got to Unbounce. And so as we were working through this project, I started to say, oh, this is really great. I think that this might be something I want to be known for. I have a lot of opinions on this. I have a lot of things I think I could share with others, but I really think this is a unique angle for me to kind of build my personal brand. And if I hadn't spent enough time in activator mode, I might have just like blown right by that. So I worked with the PMA and built my segmentation course, which was so exciting. This was a picture of me filming the course. And then one day, I used to get little emails whenever anyone would join the course. I got this email, which said, April Dunford just enrolled in segmentation certified. And I had to do a double check. Took a screen grab, obviously, still have it. And April took my course, and through that and through many conversations we had, we developed a relationship. She started to trust me. She invited me last year onto her podcast, which was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And again, if I had not spent enough time on my own personal career, that wouldn't have happened. So a few signs that you need to spend a bit more time in architect mode is, are you making career decisions reactively? So are you just kind of taking whatever job comes to you? You know, the recruiter messages you, you're like, that sounds a little bit better than what I want right now. Sure, I'll do it. Even could be the projects you're taking on, right? Oh, yeah, that project, someone needs to raise their hand. I have time, I'll do it. Do others struggle to describe what you're known for? I get a lot of requests coming into me. Oh, hey, do you know someone for this job? Or do you know someone that I can connect to that did this type of a project? And there are people in my life who I know immediately how to refer them. And there are other people who I have absolutely no idea what I would ever recommend them for. And one is not less talented than the other. They just have not communicated their value. And so what are some behaviors that you can start to prioritize? Well, decide what you actually want to do for your career. Where do you want to go next? And what's the next best move to get you there? Then build your own personal positioning that will help you clearly communicate that value. And make sure that you're not leaving growth up to chance. Actually build the right support structures to hold you accountable and support you along the way. And so there are 2 habits that you can focus on if you want to strengthen your architect mode. The first one is write your own story. I really believe this. Our careers are for us to kind of design. So spend some time thinking about what's the type of leader you want to be and how can you position your value to get you there. And then once you decide on where you want to go, actually hold yourself accountable to owning that direction and making progress continuous. And so these together is the 5 modes with the 10 habits. And I really do believe that if you can become an indispensable product marketing leader if you master the 5 modes of leadership, 1 habit at a time. So how do you do that? I kind of think of it as this little bit of an infinity wheel. It all starts with understanding, what is my leadership range today? What am I strong on? Where do I need to grow a little bit more? Then choose 1 mode to improve on. It doesn't have to be your weakest mode. Sometimes we feel like, oh, our weakest thing, I need to strengthen that first. But each of you, based on your own current roles at your current companies, the company might need something from you right now that you're not able to deliver. So actually focus on designing growth in that mode first. Then I've kind of built the blueprint for you. So once you know what mode to focus on, dig deep into both of the habits. I have tons of content on this on LinkedIn, in my newsletter, and actually start to build a leadership practice around it. I talked a lot about 5 modes, 10 habits. I built this little one-pager. If you want to screen grab it, it'll also come out with the slides. But download this, save this to your desk. When you're struggling at work and you feel like there's a challenge and you don't know, like you're coming up against a wall and the things that you would usually do are not solving it, take a step back and say, what mode do I need to activate right now to be effective in getting this solved?
Like this video, we've got loads more on demand. To access all previous event recordings, become a member. When you join, you also get access to more resources, templates, and inspiration from other leaders and PMMs. If you do want to catch us live, though, why not join us at our next event? Simply head to the link in the description to see where we're headed. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.